Hi, my name is Alistair Croll. I'm the Content Chair for Cloud Connect, an upcoming conference on cloud computing happening this March in Santa Clara, California. I'm here with a quick look at one of the topics we're going to be discussing at the conference, which is the question of standardization. Some people feel that it's too early for standards in cloud computing. Other people feel that standards are essential to avoid vendor lock-in and encourage portability between clouds. Let's have a look at that. This man's Paul Baran. Back in the early 1960s, he started looking at how to connect networks together and ultimately wrote a paper called On Distributed Communications that looked at how computer networks could cooperate and could survive things like military attacks, which was obviously of great interest to the government and eventually led to what we know today of as the Internet. He was joined by Donald Davies and Leonard Kleinrock, who were thinking of similar things, and their collective work gave us packet switching, which is the basis of the Internet today. Then Vint Cerf and Bob Kahn put Internet protocols on top of this, which allowed us to communicate between different networks, putting the inter in Internet. So these layers that these people were building, packet switching and on top of it IP and TCP and so on, are fundamental to what we think of as the Internet today, because they allow innovation. As long as TCP/IP existed, we could build web protocols on top of it, we could build voice protocols on top of it, we could build email on top of it, and we didn't have to ask for the permission of the underlying layers to build new things. Well, the nice thing about this layer model is that different groups can operate different chunks independent of one another. Along the way, while all this goodness was being baked in government labs, lots of companies were trying to build standard interoperable formats. You had IBM, Digital, Newbridge, Apple, Cisco, Bay, Four Systems, Stratacom, and so on, all of whom were proposing their own standards, things like SNA, AppleTalk, DECnet, Frame Relay, ATM, and so on. And we didn't like this much. As an industry, it meant that we were buying routers that could speak dozens of protocols, few of which we ever used. It was expensive to buy and operate these routers. They had a lot of issues in terms of replacing everything when it upgraded. They were proprietary. They didn't always interoperate. And what we really needed was some simple, open interoperability between those devices, decoupled from a particular kind of hardware, federated between one another. And in the end, what we know of today as IP won this conversation. You put stuff into the network and it just came out the other end. And that was great. You didn't care what was inside the network as long as it came out the other side. Well, cloud computing circa 2008 is about where packet switching circa 1968 was. If you look at the cloud computing model, there's a limited amount of interoperability, there aren't a lot of standards, and there are a lot of naysayers claiming that they should cling to private infrastructure rather than using a cloud environment. But in much less time than it took last time, we're going to move to simple, open, federated models. And I say this because for every detailed standard that was put together by a committee, there's a loose consensus and working code alternative that was built by a few people, proven and then documented after the fact in a series of RFCs. One of the reasons we can't predict where cloud computing is going is because technology has a way of turning on us. This is Bob Metcalfe. He's the inventor of Ethernet. He knows a thing or two about standards. Bob made a point at a recent conference that we built the Internet exactly backwards. When we first built the Internet, we assumed that long distances would be traveled over by wireless, for example, satellites, and that short distances would be traveled over by wire, like the Ethernet cable. If you think about computing today, long distances are sub-oceanic fiber optic cable, and short distances are Wi-Fi or cell phone. So pretty much all the devices on the Internet were backwards. You wanted wireless at the edge and wire in the middle, not the way we originally conceived it. And that means that a lot of the standards had to be revised and a lot of the equipment had to be swapped out, because what we anticipated from Internets did not actually become what the Internets were in the end. Another example of this is the command line interface on Cisco's networking equipment in the 1990s. Most vendors implemented a similar syntax and language because Cisco's command line interface was a de facto standard, and when an IT professional knew how to work with a Cisco router, those skills could easily be transported to other platforms. So standards efforts today really need to focus on a few things: simple, universal primitives, the separation of concerns where individual components from one cloud can interoperate with others, and a decoupling from a particular hardware vendor or a particular provider. It's an exciting time for standards development in the cloud computing world. There's a lot of chaos and there's a lot of interesting ideas, and it's one of the things we'll be covering during our 4-day conference here in Santa Clara, California. We hope you can join us to further the discussion. Thanks.